Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us. This is Patrick at Qdabra, and today we have a very quick 20-minute webinar for you to show you some key techniques in InfoPath. At Qdabra, you know, we're all about helping you to attain InfoPath enlightenment without having to give up your worldly possessions. But we also provide other ways to seek nirvana here in your life as a SharePoint admin or whatever you may be. We've got consulting, we've got a community, InfoPath Dev, and other things here. So don't be shy. Do contact us if you have any needs whatsoever regarding InfoPath, SharePoint, you name it. Today we're talking about submit and save and why it's important to make these buttons. Basically at a high level, we want to reduce the chance that your users will do the wrong thing and overwrite an existing file, call it something silly, who knows. We also want to show you several techniques for naming your forms, and this is going to be required if you're going to do the save on a submit button. 3 techniques. The most common we see today is the SharePoint Library ID. I have a surprise for you, and that is that the most popularized method does not work, and people are doing this without realizing it, and that's why we want to really have the webinar today. We were talking to one of our customers last week, and this came up yet again, so we want to clarify things for everyone. Don't use the SharePoint Library Max ID. We'll talk more about that in a second, but we have a couple alternatives. First of all, you can use the SharePoint Library ID, and I'll show you the right way to do it. But secondly, you can use a natural key like a date and a time, or even a unique identifier like a GUID. And I'll show you all those techniques in my demo. We have a bonus. We actually have 2 bonuses today. The first bonus, though, is check in, check out. This is something that's really essential for your forms, and I'll show you a quick example of it. And we have an XML template part that goes with it. That means that you can quickly drag and drop the check in, check out functionality into your existing forms, configure it, and be good to go. And so it saves you some time when you're trying to use what you learned today. So to start off with, let's take a look at save and submit. So I have a form library. This is my SharePoint site, and I've got a bunch of demos for you today. So I'm just going to try to find the correct form library. This is my demo for 725. I have a form I've published to the browser. And this form, as you saw last week, we're using the same kind of format. So the form actually has a bunch of text in it for you to review. So when you open up the form in the designer, you'll see that we have this guidance text at the bottom of the InfoPath form. This is going to help you serve as a reference when you look at the form after the class or after the webinar today. But when you preview it in the browser, we don't see that. So just rest assured that it is there. So here we have a form, and the form has got a title. It's got it's basically describing. It's got a subtitle. We've got 2 sections. We're basically trying to figure out where the form lives, and we've got some sample data in the form. Now your form is going to have mostly data. It's not going to have these diagnostic things, but we have here 2 buttons, save and submit. Now notice what I've done first off is I've disabled the ribbon. And you can do this in InfoPath by going into the File, Form Options, and on the Web Browser tab, you can see here that I've disabled that InfoPath commands in the ribbon or toolbar. You see that checkbox is not checked. By default, it is checked. You're going to see the ribbon there. So we've removed the ribbon, and therefore, we've removed the save and the save as that you see down below here. So the form is showing up in the browser without any of that extra goo. We're not allowing the user to hurt themselves by saving the file as the wrong name. And that's really, if we go back to the presentation for a second, that's really the reason why we want to do this. We don't want users to use inappropriate names when they're saving the form, nor do we want them to save it in a location that is not helpful. Maybe it's on their local machine, who knows. We also don't want to allow them to overwrite their colleagues' work. And that's why we want to control the save and the submit. When they click on save, we're going to create the name for them. right? And I'll talk more about that in a second. So the basic way you do this is, like I just showed, you turn off the file save and file save as. The filler also has those options in it. So if you're using the filler and not the browser, you have to do the same. You have to do that twice, really. Well, in the filler's case, it's just a different. It's just a different switch here. So it's right here on the second tab here underneath Form Options. And then you're going to ask me, well, wait a minute. If it's a button, how the heck am I going to submit it if I have required fields? I knew you'd ask that question. So here I have a form with required fields. I've got a form with 4 different rows, and I've got some required fields over here. You see this little asterisk on the right. You're familiar with InfoPath, of course. You know that that signifies that it is required. So, I could have, to webinar, whatever. And if I save it now, what's going to happen? It's going to magically work. And you're wondering, well, how on earth did I do it? Now, notice when I did that, those asterisks went away. And, of course, we disabled the submit button. And so the way we do this is we have a command in QRules that allows us to clear the errors. Let me just go back to the presentation for a second. So the clear errors command clears the validation errors, and because we're clearing the validation errors, we definitely do not want to allow them to submit it because the form is in a saved state, and therefore now we saved it without any name. So and I'm going to just quickly add a natural key, a name to this form, and save it again, and go back to my library here. And if we refresh, we should see here that at 8:11 a.m. I actually created, I've got two forms here. I've got one at 8:12 a.m. and one at 8:11. The first time I saved it, it used the now function to create the name. And you can see here that I don't have a form query key in here. We'll talk more about this in a second. But the second time I saved it, I saved it with this longer number. And if I open that, you'll see that that's the data that I had. And of course, we can go in and fill out the rest of the data. Now on load, you're going to want to make sure you re-enable that submit button so that they can submit it, because notice what happened when we loaded the form. It actually revalidated the data. So the clear errors works fine because the next time they open it, it's going to revalidate it. Now I have a very simple minor flaw in this form, which I did not fix yet, which is I did not re-enable the submit button on open. So we'll have to do that. But that's easy to do. If we go to our form, we'll have a rule on load, and we'll add this rule to the form load command, and we're just going to set the field status, and that is the form status, and we're just going to set it to blank on load, and we'll republish. Just publishing it as a site collection admin. It's got QRules in the form, but I don't need to worry about any kind of admin deploy because I'm running 2010 here. And so let's go back to that form and let's open up again. And this was the one I saved at 8:12. And now you can see that I have the submit button. Now if I click on submit, it's going to complain. It's going to say, well, wait a minute, you have validation errors in your form. And this is exactly what we would expect. So I can fill this out. And now the submit should work. Okay, so very quickly then, that's a rough overview of the save and submit. Once again, you want to control where the user saves and submits the form, and you're going to use submit buttons to do that. in the case where you have required fields, this isn't really a huge issue. You can just wait until they fill out the form. But sometimes people are in a hurry. They need to get on a plane, and they don't want to have to fill out a really long form before they do it. And so in those cases where people are complaining, you get a long form, whatever, we do have an option to clear those errors. You don't have to use it. You can just basically require that they fill out the form, and then the save, it functions very similar to the submit, and you don't necessarily need two buttons. But the idea here is that you're using a button in the form to save it or submit it, and the reason why you want to do that is because you want to name the form accurately. You want to prevent them from overwriting their colleagues' work. You want to make sure they save it to the right location, and it gets a unique, consistent name. So the second part, and if you've got questions, feel free to post your questions, and I'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So now, in order to save or submit on a button, you have to name your form something, right? And we have this technique, which is very popularized, and it's, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to say it's the max ID technique. And if we look at Google, if we just Google it, for example, there's two posts that come up at the top. There's Clayton's post, and we love Clayton, but he's not saying the right thing here. He's saying use max ID. And the same thing is true for SYM Wongaton in New Zealand. She's saying do the same thing Clayton's saying. But they're both wrong, because what happens with max ID is people can actually overwrite the form because they submit at the same time. Now you could say, well, Patrick, they're not going to be submitting at the same time, but you never know. So simultaneous submits will end up using the same ID. In addition, if you've got a view that has permissions on it, or it's not showing everything, it won't work because it won't get the max ID. It'll get something else. And I want to thank Doreen for bringing this up in the forum last week. And thirdly, it's going to pull everything down from your library when it gets the max ID anyway. So if you've got a really large library, it's just not performant. So do not use max ID. It's just broken. And I don't know why people have used it. They got in the habit of doing it. But, you know, I think the people that have been popularizing it, they're not really developers. They came to SharePoint from a different area, so they're probably not aware of these issues. But this is not a good technique. So what do you do? So the technique that we're going to show is, just going to open up, I'll just create a new form here. Same form I just showed you. I've got two views on this form. I've actually got 4 views. I've got the 2 views from last week's webinar as well you can take a look at. So we're going to go to the second view now. And on the second view, you'll see that I have, basically it looks exactly the same, except I have the SharePoint ID here, right? And I have save and submit. So let's say I added some information here, like go get coffee or something, whatever. And if we do save, now it's going to automatically okay, it didn't work the way I wanted to. We need to do it again. I have a very small issue with the form that is, a lot of times when you're writing logic, you're going to have to debug things. Let's just do it one more time here. It's just a sequence issue. When I demoed this last night when I was testing it, I did in a slightly different order. So first of all, your form has to have a unique key. So in this case, we're going to give it a unique key. It can be anything, but we're going to use a GUID function. I'll talk more about that in a second. So here we've generated a unique ID for the form. And now we're going to click Save. And what it's going to do is it's going to save it to SharePoint. And you see it got that 13 ID there, right? And if we save it again, no problem. And now if we go back to our library and refresh it, we should see that new form down below. And if I open it up, it indeed is the 13th one. And if we go back to our SharePoint ID screen, you can see that it's got 13 there, and it allows me to continue editing it. And the second time I do it, it's not updating that. So what we've done here is we've saved it twice. Let's take a look at the form in the designer. Now this is going to be, like I said, there's 4 views in the designer. There's the views from last week on changing URLs and copying data. And then from this week, there's the default view, which shows you how to do the save and submit with all the instructions there at the bottom. And then there's the view I'm on right now, which is submitting with SharePoint ID. Now this view also has the instructions at the bottom. And you can read up on how we did this. And I'm going to explain it right now. Basically, the reason why we're doing this is because it doesn't work the way it's described in the popular blogs. The solution is to create a unique key. It can be a natural key. It can be a global unique ID. And to use that to do a submit at the beginning. So you submit the form, and then what you do is you query it using that key. So in 2010, we have the option. Let me just show you this query here. So I have this rule called get SharePoint ID and resubmit. You can see that over here on the right. So when they click on save, it's going to do the things we did in the first view. It's going to clear the validation errors, set the status to saved. It's going to submit the form, and then what it's going to do is it's going to it should be setting the form to full date name, but it's not doing that. There's a bug there I need to fix before I send you the package. But then what it does is it has this rule that has a condition that says, hey, if the ID is blank, if we've never done this before, if it's the first time we're saving this form, then we're going to set the form query equal to the form name. And this form query is actually in the secondary data source. So here we have, I'm just going to clear my throat. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so the secondary data source has a query field. And in 2010, all you have to do is set that equal to the value of the form that you want to retrieve, which we're doing here. We know it's going to be form name because we just named the form with that globally unique ID or the natural key. And then we're going to query it. We're going to get that form's data in our secondary data source. And we're going to use that form data to set our SharePoint ID. When we query it, we're going to get this ID back. And this is, once again, this is just from the data fields in the secondary data source. So by setting the query field, querying the data connection, it's actually going to pull back that row of information from the SharePoint library, which gives us the ID. Now, why is this better than the previous approach? Because then we can submit the form with the ID in it, and we know it's unique. Why? Because we let SharePoint add it and SharePoint ID it. We submit it once, we got the ID, we submit again with the correct ID, and we're done. So that's basically, in a nutshell, why that works so well. So once again, you're going to promote a key in your form. It can be anything. It can be date timestamp. It can be a global unique ID. You're going to publish your form out there so that column gets added. And you can see with my SharePoint site, if I go back to the library, I have this column here called form query. And what we're doing is we're going to then query this library, setting that form query equal to the ID of the form, which is going to return only one item, the one we're interested in. And then what we do is we take the ID, which you don't see the ID here, but the ID is there, right? If we go into the change the view to add that column, you'll see that those IDs show up. So we'll just go down to ID here, change our view, click OK, and you'll see that the last one here is 13. It's putting the IDs on the right, but you can see here at the very right bottom that 13 ID is what SharePoint gave it. That ID is something that SharePoint controls. Okay, any questions on those? Post those questions. I'll get to those in a second. Now you may have a question about workflow, and this actually Doreen had another point here which is worth mentioning, which is if you have a workflow that's changing permissions when you save the form, just make sure that the workflow doesn't run until the second submit. Okay, so let's take a look at these other ways of naming. So that's the first way you want to name your form, is using the SharePoint ID. The second way of naming your form is using a natural key. Now, a natural key is basically, it's an ID which you create, for example, using a date timestamp or the user's name. And the reason why you want to use these natural keys is because SharePoint IDs are fine if you use the technique I just described. However, if you migrate your form from one site to another, those IDs will all change, even though the IDs in the form did not, and there'll be massive confusion. So don't use the IDs if you're going to be migrating your data a lot. They're fine for most cases, but if you want to be a little better, use natural keys. Natural keys are meaningful. They have natural data. You're using the fields data, the form's field data, to create a key that is unique. And username and date time are great options here. But you may say, wait a minute, I've got too many saves. I've got thousands of forms going in, and I want to prevent duplicates, and the date and time stuff is going to the second granularity, and that's not good enough. So we have a solution. We'll give you milliseconds. So we have a get full date time function here that gives us the milliseconds, and you can see when I click on natural key, it's giving me 2013, 0725, that's the date today, 0826, that's the time, it's 8:26 a.m. in Seattle, 44 seconds after the clock, and 493 milliseconds. Now that's guaranteed to be more unique than just saving it with seconds. And of course, if you prepend this name with your username, it'll be even more distinct, because it's unlikely that the same user could submit the same form within the same millisecond. Okay, so that's the technique for getting the natural key. Now, how do we do that? And I've described this once again in the form, or in the deck. Actually, I've described this in the deck. But what we're doing here is, let's go back to the first view. So you have a button, and the button has a rule, and the rule is going to set the form's name, and we're going to use our qrules command to get the full date time. And then what we do is we set the result for that command, and we then concatenate it into a format we want. Now, the nice thing about this is that we can actually use any format we want here. So here you can see that I've got the format in year, month, date, hour, and then at the end I've got milliseconds. And this is just using the standard formatting characters that Microsoft.NET is familiar with. So if you're a developer, you'll recognize this format. If you're not, you can just use the format that I have here, or look at the documentation on the format date command. The format date command takes that date field and then it formats it based on this string. So you can format it however you want. I've just chosen this format, descending order of granularity, right? From year to month to day and so on, milliseconds being the last one. Now I can certainly change this to add more information like the username to it. And then once we're done with that formatting, we just set that result into the form name, and that's the unique name of the form. Now I also have another technique. Let's just quickly go back to summarize the natural key. So once again, natural key can be used, and we have milliseconds if you're using qrules. And we have a special offer at the end for those of you who don't have qrules. The next approach is to use a GUID or a GUIDs. And let's say, hey, I don't like natural keys because I need more coffee. And you say, well, or username is inappropriate because I don't want to show who submitted the form. Okay, fine, I understand. Or maybe it's the fact that you have to get the user profile service because you've got an admin deployed form and you can't get the username. There's a couple of reasons why the natural keys may not be for you. So we have another solution. It's called GUIDs. And basically what we're doing here is we're generating a GUID, a globally unique ID, and that looks a bit long and hard to read, but that's what it is. It's always going to be unique, right? And by generating that then, and by naming the form, I can, of course, it's going to complain of the submit because I don't have the form, the fields filled out, and that's why you want to use save. And then we're going to get that 14 ID. So what it did there was just what I described earlier, but we're using that global unique ID to create a unique ID, and that works just fine. Those were the demos. Once again, to recap, don't write the code for GUID. Use QRules because code is bad. It won't migrate to all your forms unless you do it in a really common way. We've already done that for you with QRules during GUID command. Piece of cake. Very easy to do. Okay, before we get to the bonus, I want to just ask, I know people might have a schedule that run off to do something. I want to just look at the questions here and see if we have any questions from you. We have quite a few questions this morning. Thanks for asking them. Nathan has a question using double save solution, first save hidden. If you, let's see, I'm not quite sure what the question is there, Nathan. Sorry about that. It looks like get a real library ID plus any extra company indexing may also be needed to delete the draft saved from copy with the dual save approach. No, you're just overwriting it. So it's using that GUID, right, that name that's unique. So you don't have to delete it. Now, we do have a technique for deleting forms. I might talk about that next week, but bottom line is, yeah, you don't have to worry about that because it is the same. It's unique. So another question from Adam. If you haven't saved the form and you click on the close window, will it ask you to save? Now, it will if you're in the the filler. If you're in the browser, there's no close here. We just close IE and it goes away. So it's not going to prompt you at all. It's just gone, right? And now I have to go back to it. Great question, though, Adam. Thank you for asking that. And then let's see. We've got a question from Evan saying the microphone is going in and out. Well, I'm sorry about that. We'll try to improve the audio here. And I have a question from Ralph. Do you have a preference between using the GUID and a natural key for this purpose? I like the natural key because it's more meaningful. It gives me information that might be useful in the future, the first time the form was saved, for example, and who did it. So that's why I would recommend the natural key over the GUID. But there are cases, like I mentioned, where you don't want to show the user's name. You don't care about the first time they saved it. And in those cases, the GUID works fine. It's slightly more unique, or it can, it's slightly better at preventing duplication than the natural key, especially if you're using the natural key without the milliseconds. Adam has a question. Can you hide the ribbon for the InfoPath filler? Actually, that's a great question. I don't think you can, but I don't know. So it would be on that menu if it was there. And you would just, let's just see here. So the filler here doesn't have the option. It's just for the web browser. So I'm guessing that you can't do it. So great question. Matthew has a question. Does the save method create 2 copies of the form? No, it doesn't. Like I said with the other responder, the other questioner, it's not creating 2 copies because we save it with a unique name, and then we overwrite that one with the information, with the ID information. So we save it, we query it, get the ID back, set the ID in the form, and then save it again with the same name. So there's no duplication. And if you're running a workflow, for example, just make sure that you condition the workflow so it doesn't fire on the first save or the first submit. And the way you do that is just set status field in your form and have a condition on the workflow that skips over whatever you're doing in the workflow if it's in that pending save state. A lot of questions this morning. That's great. I'm just going to continue answering the questions here for a minute or two and then get to the bonuses. And I thank you for being patient here with these questions. Files going to SharePoint with a name given through the form used to need a QRules command to do that. Do you need a QRules command to, I'm not sure, Jess, I understand your question here. Yeah, you don't need QRules to name the form. You can use natural keys without QRules. Naden Nichev, any changes to the form should ask whether to save the form. It is asking in your case at least. Well, any change to the form, I mean, I guess that's true. You may not want people to lose their data. So that's actually a good point. That if you don't have a if you're submitting the form, well, certainly they can close the browser and they can lose their data, and that's one of the disadvantages of using the browser form. There's no way for us to capture the fact that they've made changes and to try to prevent them from doing that. They can just close the browser. There's nothing we can do because we don't get any events back when that happens. So you're right, Nathan, that's a problem, but that's not specific to my technique. That's still there with other people too. If you just have the file save as on the ribbon, you can still close the browser and it's not going to ask them to save. King's got a question. How do you start your workflow only on the first save? Just use a condition. So your workflow will have a condition on it. You'll have a workflow, reusable workflow with a step, and in that step you'll have a condition. The condition is going to check the status value. And if the status is saved or pending or whatever, then it's going to skip that step. And the way you do that is you promote the status from your form. And then if you promote the status as a field, a property, then the workflow can see it. So the first thing you do is you set status equal to pending, right? Then you'd submit it. Then you'd query it. Then you'd set status equal to saved, and then you'd submit it again. So the first submit is going to be pending. So the workflow will actually catch that, and it will skip over it. It won't do this step in the workflow if it's pending. Bob's got a question. In InfoPath errors stink. I agree. Is there a way to create more friendly error messages? Yes, there is. And actually, Curls provides it, I believe. You're in the advanced area now. But yes, you can actually get the errors from the error board, and you can try to parse them, make sense of them, and provide the user with a more reasonable error. It's a little tricky, but you can do it. And if you're interested, I know you can contact us, so don't be shy. And then Tom's got a question. How does the user tell between saved and submitted? Well, the user doesn't. They're just clicking save or submitted. And the idea here is that if you've got a really long form, you need two buttons because they may have some required fields. They may not want to fill out the whole form before they do the initial save. Let's say they're going to lunch, right? They've got half the form filled out, and they know that the browser session might time out, right, if they're gone for an hour. So the save button allows them to quickly save their data, persist it, so that when they come back, it's there. And that's why, for the longer forms, you want to have both the save and a submit. If it's a short form, you just have to submit. You don't care, right? Because they can always fix the required fields, and then you don't even need to have the clear errors. Great question. Okay, so those are the questions now. I know we're going over a little bit. I appreciate your patience. I just want to show a couple more quick demos, and basically the check-in, check-out XCP. Let's take a look here. So we have on our site another form library called check-in, check-out v2. Okay, so this is a really, really simple form, and what we're doing here is we just have two fields in the form, and the customer's name, Sally, and if we save the form, it automatically checks it out. The form is checked out for your edits. If we go back to the library, using the close in the ribbon, not the close of the browser, then you'll see that the form is checked out to InfoPath Trainee 1. That's me. I click on the form, it opens it up. Oops, that's the wrong form. Okay, so I need to refresh. Okay, where's the form? There it is. Okay, so here's the form I just added with my save time. And I can check it in, right, and close the form. Of course, you want to disable that close check there, even though that may result in data loss. I would change it. People know what to do. And now you can see that that checkout is removed. Now, why do we care about checkout and check-in? Well, it's because of this scenario I just painted here. People are editing the same form. The browser isn't going to prevent them from overwriting their work. And that's why you want to check out the form. Now, normally in SharePoint, you have to go in, right, and you have to click on this little drop down and say check out or check in, right? In this case, it would check out. but people don't see this. And so this ends up causing a lot of problems. So what we're doing here is we're just automatically checking out the form for them when they open the form. So you can see here that I can open this one. I tested this earlier, and I can check this out because I can open it and edit it because I had it checked out. And I can submit it, and there it is. It's checked in. So the submit actually checks in automatically. Now this control, this little check-in, check-out thing, is an XML template part that we provide. We normally charge for this. I think we charge $100 or so. And we're going to provide this to you. And the check-in, check-out control is an XTP2. It's an XML template part. So when you're creating your InfoPath form from scratch, all you have to do is add it to your controls at the top. Add or remove custom controls. You add the template part. And in this case, we're going to add the check-in, check-out. Now I've already added it, so it's going to complain that it's already there. So I'll just use the one I have. If I can find it. And this automatically adds this to your form, and it's got these instructions. So the nice thing here is that you'll need to configure it a little bit, but it automatically adds the data connections, it automatically adds everything you need to do the check-in, the check-out. We're just using stock SharePoint check-in, check-out here. So that's a really cool technique. I highly recommend that you try it. And we have a question. Hold on. Will the check-in, check-out feature work in 2007? Great question, Matthew. What? There's still people in 2007? You've got to be kidding me. Yes, we have a version that works in 2007, I think. But this one's 2010 only. So if you send us email to webinars@qdabra.com, we'll try to dig it up for you. Okay. Next. Oh, wait, there's more. There's one more bonus I want to show you. And I just love doing demos. And I know if you might be tired of me already, but let's just take a look at this indent sample. So the problem is that you've got a table and you want to indent rows to show that they're, show which ones are children of which other ones, which parents. And out of box, you can't really do this because InfoPath doesn't allow you to just insert. You can see here that the widget here that lets me insert a record after, but I can't indent them, right? So we have this control that lets you indent things. And here I'm just showing you all the information. But isn't this cool? And of course, the data source is normalized. So it's using the same data source for all of these. If we look at the data source here, it's just record. That's it, right? How did we do it? Well, you can read up on it, but in a nutshell, how we did it was we just keep track of the level and the parent. We have a button that inserts the form, the child at a position, and we need the button because out of the box, the widget doesn't return the ID or the position of the parent, so that's important. And the button uses QRules to insert the row. And we have this calculated value here on the left, which gives us our tabbing or our indentation. If we look at the calculated value properties, you'll be shocked to see how I'm doing this. I'm just taking the substring with all these underscores and I'm multiplying it by the level. So it's indenting it based on the level. And then of course I think I use a font that cannot be seen or something here so you don't see the underbars. So that's how simple it really is, and you'll get that as part of the kit today that we provide to you. So last but not least, we are here to help you, and I wanted to just give a quick mic over to Alyssa to talk about these special QRules offer today. That's right. If you looked at all these demos I did and you're thinking, what, I gotta have QRules, right? Well, there's an offer. Alyssa, are you there?
I am here. Thank you, Patrick. So basically, we just wanted to let you guys know we are having a special offer going on with QRules. As Patrick showed a lot of what it could do today for you guys, we wanted to give you an option to get this product for free. So basically what you do, you use QRules. There's a free trial on our website. You show us a quick demo and you let us record it. So show us something cool you can do with QRules. Send us a couple sentences, testimonial, why you like the product, and we can give you it for free. So it really is a great offer. Just have fun with it. Show us something that it can do that's really cool for you, and you can get the product. So let us know. You can email qdsales.com to get in touch with us. Otherwise, email Patrick or myself, and we can get you going with the special offer.
Yeah, and this offer is only available to those who went to this webinar. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And thank you all for being here for a little bit of longer webinar this morning. Don't forget to send the feedback, and we will send you everything you saw today. And for the forms that you saw, you don't need Q rules because it's already in there. So have at. You can use those forms, and you can change them to make them your forms. You don't need Q rules to do that, but it is there. And I think that's it for the questions. Hey, I want to thank you all again. Have a great day. We'll talk to you in a week.